Hey, Jeff, you remember how we did that fun, where will Alphabet be in 5 years kind of mind construct to think about that business?
I do remember we recorded it minutes ago.
We did. We just literally are recording them back to back. I want to do the same thing with Berkshire Hathaway.
Ah, that's a fun one to do. All right, I'm in.
Okay, let's do it. All right, I'm Jason Hall. He's Jeff Santoro. This is Investing Unscripted. We get to make these awesome videos because we have an awesome partnership. This video is sponsored by The Motley Fool. If you're looking for even more great stock ideas, go to our special link. You see it there on the screen. It's fool.com/unscripted. It's easy to type in. Just type it in and go check it out. You can get access to The Motley Fool's 10 best stocks to buy right now. Go check out that link. Might see something to subscribe to. Pay for it. It's worth it. It's awesome. Trust me. Plus, it helps us fund the great stuff that we get to make on this channel. Okay, Jeff, Berkshire Hathaway.
Never heard of it.
Yeah, me neither. Everybody's heard of Berkshire Hathaway. There's a lot of stuff in Berkshire Hathaway people might not know that it owns, like Fruit of the Loom, Dairy Queen, McLean, the trucking company, manufactured homes, Forest River that makes RVs, like all of those things. And of course, then there's the big ones. There's Geico, BNSF Railroads, the big stock portfolio, like all of those things that makes Berkshire Hathaway. Again, the construct we're using is where will Berkshire be in 5 years? So here's two things that I know are going to happen in less than 5 months. Warren Buffett is no longer going to be the CEO.
Right.
Greg Abel is going to be the CEO. Buffett's still going to be the chairman. But here's a big question. 5 years from now, do you think Warren Buffett is still going to be the chairman of Berkshire Hathaway?
I hope so. I don't want to wish ill or a shorter life on someone like Warren Buffett, but actuarially, I guess I don't know where I put the odds.
Let's not bet on that one, right?
No,
Let's
but
not-
here's
yeah.
how I would answer your question, though. I think if you're an investor in Berkshire Hathaway or considering an investment in Berkshire Hathaway, the thing we know, as you said, is that he will no longer be the CEO at the end of 2025. The question I think is worth thinking about, no one will really know. I think it's twofold. One is how much influence will he have as chairman of the board? And then the second piece is like, well, how long will he be in that role? And I think those are unknowns. So I think the next year, right? So like maybe the first 6 to 8 months of the time where Warren is no longer the CEO, like the beginning of 2026, might give us some insight into what the next couple of years might look like.
Yeah, I think that's fair. My prognostication for Buffett, again, I'm not going to pick a number. I just think that's a little crass, but I will say that I think as long as he has the physical and mental capability to remain chairman, he's going to. I think this is a role, frankly, that he's prepared to die as the chairman. And his decision to move out of the CEO seat was as much making sure there wasn't a crisis with him dying as CEO and making sure that the transition had already happened. And also knowing that Greg Abel's ready and it was time to do that. But I think his hand as that steadying influence on the culture of the business, on setting the company's long-term goals, things like stock buybacks, dividend policy, those are things the board controls, right? So his role, even though it's diminished from operations, is still going to be very critical as long as he remains the chairman. So now let's think about what Buffett has built at Berkshire Hathaway. I'm going to bring up on the screen each of these different colors. They represent the pre-tax earnings of different segments of the business. So we have the insurance business, that's Geico, General Indemnity, the reinsurance business. We have BNSF, the big railway, Berkshire Hathaway Energy, which is its utilities business and also some other operations there. We also have its manufacturing business, which is growing as they continue to add things. We just saw the acquisition of the petrochemicals business.
Occidental Petroleum.
Yeah, from Oxy. Thank you, Jeff. So they're growing their manufacturing business. They have a big retail business as well. I mentioned Dairy Queen. And then, of course, this is basically the mark to market that they have to do for the stock portfolio every quarter.
Yeah.
Against unrealized and realized gains and losses. That's why it can look so giant up and down from quarter to quarter, but that's the perpetual investments they have in stocks. So we have lots of things that investors are exposed to, Jeff, and kind of the core of it is over the past 40 years, Buffett has built it through steady acquisitions, starting out with adding some insurance companies and See's Candy, using the cash flows from See's and the insurance float to make more acquisitions, buying some stocks along the way, using the dividends of those stocks, and occasionally selling one of the holdings or part of a holding, and then rolling that capital over and over and over again until you now have $1 trillion business that is incredibly diversified. So we talked about Buffett, and we've got all these operations. Buffett has said that the tacit agreement he made when he acquired these businesses, in a lot of cases, not all of them, BNSF, he bought it from the shareholders. It was a publicly traded company. But Forest River is a good recent example. He sat across the table from the owner of the company, bought it from him, and the owner continued to run the business actually until he died last year. So they have these subsidiaries that are, some of them are smaller businesses that Buffett's agreement was that he would continue to own them forever. I'm less convinced that that's going to remain the case in a post-Buffett operated Berkshire Hathaway, particularly when a lot of those original owners that sold are no longer involved in the business and we're moving on to other generations, where maybe that kind of social pact, that obligation that Buffett may have felt, no longer is necessarily going to apply. And maybe we see Berkshire under Greg Abel start to shrink a little bit in terms of some of the widely diverse holdings that it has.
I kind of agree with you. My sense of it is the one thing that's going to remain when Warren steps into the chairman role and then whenever he stops being the chairman is that the culture will remain. I think he and Charlie, before he passed, talked a lot about building a culture. And if you read any books or read any of the things that they've said, culture runs through almost every decision that they make. So I would imagine Greg Abel's going to perpetuate that culture to whatever degree he can. So I think where I agree with you is when maybe, like you said, the owner of the business that Warren sat across and did the handshake to buy the business with, when they step away from running it, maybe if it's not a family member that ends up running it after that, or there's just some feeling that like, you know what, now is it okay time to spin this off? I agree with you, but I think there's going to be some where it remains for a really long time because the family still runs the business or whatever the circumstances are. Also, as Berkshire grows, these businesses, some of them are going to become smaller and smaller portions of the overall pie. We say a lot, there's only so many companies they can buy that would even move the needle. I think the same is true on the other end. Like, what's the benefit of selling off one of these smaller establishments if it's not really going to move the needle on the operations of the business? So I think that's something to consider too.
I think that's fair, but I don't want to say pushback here, but a lot of its subsidiaries tend to operate less profitable, less efficient, and not as nimble or as good as their publicly traded pure play competitors. And I think that means that there probably is opportunity to improve some of those businesses, potentially sell them or spin them off. And also that hands-off model at times has led to deterioration. I think we can look at the fact that Ted Combs he was brought in to pick stocks. He's now the CEO of Geico. He has been since 2020, because Geico has certainly fallen behind competitors like Progressive, right? That is far ahead in things like telematics and using technology across its business, and is a far more profitable business. And I can tell you anecdotally, I'm a Progressive insurance customer now, and I looked at Geico and even used my shareholder discount, and it just wasn't competitive with Progressive. So I really do think that there's going to be some asset sales that are going to happen over that period, because as much as they made these acquisitions of businesses, counting on having great people and culture in those businesses to continue to operate them, that decentralized hands-off model, you have less influence over the culture of those subsidiaries. So I think we might see some of those businesses where they just don't think that the juice is worth the squeeze to try to figure out how they can improve them. And they either find a buyer or maybe spin them off as a new publicly traded company and award Berkshire shareholders a percentage of the new stock as a way to return value to shareholders. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see some of those things happen. I will make this prediction though. I think if the stock market, the S&P 500 is poor performing over the next 5 years, maybe around or less than the long-term average, I think Berkshire is going to do better. I think if the market continues on this 12, 13, 14% average annualized returns that we've seen over the past number of years, I think Berkshire is going to get left in the dust. I'm going to hold my shares for now, but that's my prediction of where it's going to be in 5 years. What do you think?
My prediction for 5 years from now, and I agree with you, there will be some of that selling of the subsidiary businesses. I just don't think there's going to be as much as I've heard some people predict.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think 5 years from now, what you're going to see as a more stark difference is activity in the stock portfolio. I feel like that's where there'll be a little more leeway, I guess is a way to think of it, or Greg Abel might feel a little bit more unencumbered to make some changes. And I think and I believe that because of how much Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger too would talk about circle of competence. And I think he's smart enough to know that his circle of competence is certainly going to be different than any other human beings. So I think the idea of staying within your circle of competence and the general philosophy around taking positions in companies that you don't buy wholesale will stick with Greg Abel.
All right. What do you say we check back in 5 years and see how we did?
Let's do it.